Today is about the bulging disc. What is it and how do we treat it? And we're picking bulging disc. Well, it tends to be a very common problem when you have back pain, but typically the conditions we talk about are back pains that didn't get better, or they're stubborn, or they're stuck. So we talk about why they're stuck and what to do about it. So we're going to talk about what the bulging disc is and what we do to treat it. But first of all, we'll define what a bulging disc is. Head here, hips here, 24 vertebrae between the head and the hips. The vertebrae are the bones, and in between each bone there is a disc. The disc allows for motion of the vertebrae. Each vertebrae moves in 6 directions: forward, back, side to side, and rotate, and that motion takes place on top of the disc. Also, what the disc does is the disc allows for enough room between each vertebrae for a nerve to exit directly off of the spinal cord. 24 vertebrae between the head and the hips, and then in between each vertebrae there's an opening called the foramen. And sometimes what can happen when you have neck pain or you have back pain is you can have a little irritation to that nerve. Or worse yet, you can have a little irritation to the disc. And the problem is, when you have that irritation, if you don't treat it right, the problem doesn't go away. And these videos are about how to treat it and how to get it so it goes away. Because chronic back pain is on the rise, and we treat chronic back pain. So here's the disc. One vertebrae on top of the other, the disc in between right here. The disc is a lot like a jelly donut, in the sense that the outside of the disc, there's a thick material we call the annulus. Inside the disc, there's a jelly-like substance called the nucleus. The nucleus gives stability to the disc the same way air gives stability to your tire. So when the nucleus is well hydrated, the disc is more stable. But what happens sometimes is you can decrease the flow of oxygen and nutrients into the disc. There's a network of arteries that runs up and down the outside. The disc is the largest avascular structure. There are no veins or arteries to go through it, but there is a network of arteries that runs up and down the outside that supplies the outer 1/3 of the annulus, the oxygen and nutrients. And there's a network of arteries that run through the vertebrae that supply the oxygen and nutrients across what's called the end plate of the vertebrae into the annulus, and more importantly into the nucleus. Now this is important because when you decrease the flow in this area, which can happen because of too much load or too much wear and tear or not proper motion, when you have one of those variables, what happens is you decrease the flow. And when you decrease the flow into the nucleus starts to dry out. And as the nucleus starts to dry out, that's the beginning phase of a degenerated disc. But also what it does is it allows for the annulus to push out. And when the annulus pushes out, it's called a bulging disc. Now again, one vertebrae on top of the other. Outer portion is the annulus, inner portion is the nucleus. In the very outer portion, it's kind of hard to see it, there's little nerves on the outer portion of the annulus. And when you get a bulging disc, what happens is you start to get an increase in load on those nerves, and those nerves then activate the brain. There's something wrong. And that activation of that portion of the nerve is usually what causes the back pain from a bulging disc. So it kind of looks like this. Top view here of the annulus. Here's the nucleus on the inside. What happens sometimes as you decrease the flow of oxygen and nutrients, it starts to dry out, but you can also change the pressure on the disc, and when the disc is under pressure, it'll start to push out. It pushes out beyond the bone. And when it pushes out beyond the bone, that's called a bulging disc. If it tears all the way through or pushes out further, that's the herniated disc. But in this case, it's the bulging disc. And we're talking about the bulging disc because it tends to be very common. A lot of people say, oh, I have a bulging disc, I have to live with it, or it's no big deal, it'll be okay. If you don't treat it properly, very often it gets worse. That's the key to the bulging disc. But what happens is the disc starts to bulge to the outside. And sometimes what happens is the entire disc starts to bulge, pushes out, because the nucleus pushes in that direction. And as it does that, it increases the load on the outer portion of the annulus. So the disc will start to push out beyond the end of the bone. And when it pushes out beyond the end of the bone, that's the bulging disc. Looks like this. One vertebrae on top of the other. Here's the spinal canal right here in the back. Here's a healthy nucleus. What happens sometimes, the nucleus starts to dry out and then the disc tends to bulge. The angle of the load pushes on that disc and the disc is pushing out. Same thing right here. Pushing on the disc is pushing out. Okay? As it pushes out, sometimes, and there are 5 causes of sciatica, one of the causes is that bulging disc. The disc is bulging into the canal, pinching that nerve, and that nerve then goes down the leg, causing the sciatica. Tends to be common. Okay? We have a 9-step process to eliminate sciatica, but one of those steps is to eliminate the bulging disc. We have exercises, we do MRIs, we do movement patterns to help you get in the right position. So what do? We have a process where we take pressure off the disc. It's called unweighting. As we unweight the disc, what it allows for the disc to move back to the inside. As the disc moves back to the inside, it unloads the outer portion where those nerves are, so the pain goes away. We take pressure off, have you do exercises, okay? We call it functional disc stabilization. It's advanced physical therapy where we unweight the disc, take pressure off. You wear a vest and a harness, and we slowly take pressure off. We don't pull you apart. We're not taking a lot of pressure off. I weigh 200 pounds. We'll take 100 pounds of pressure off. Take pressure off, do the exercises in an unweighted environment, and restore the disc integrity. Okay? Starts to get better. So what does that mean? As we take the pressure off, this starts to move back to the inside. This is jelly, and when it dries out, it's a little bit more like Play-Doh. As we take the pressure off, it slowly moves in, and what it does is it allows for that nucleus to move in, and the annulus pushes back in as well. So that bulging disc that's pushing out there starts to go back to the inside. Same thing here. Starts to move back to the inside. Take pressure off, starts to move back to the inside. Okay? So we have a case study of a patient that had a bulging disc. 40-year-old female, back pain for 4 years. Didn't just happen, she's had it for a while. Saw chiropractors over the years, did not get better. She was suffering from a bulging disc and a degenerative disc. They tend to be connected. They're not exactly the same. They're 2 different conditions, but it's part of the degenerative cascade that we've talked about in other videos, and maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, because all back problems tend to be connected through this degenerative cascade. So she had the bulging disc, had the degenerated disc. When she came into our clinic, and she had tried these other therapies and not gotten better. When she came into our clinic, her Oswestry Disability Index was a 52. From 0 to 100, Oswestry Disability Index is how disabled you are as a result of the pain. 52 is very disabled. 52 is a candidate for surgery. Chose not to have surgery, came to see us. Her back pain was a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, or 0 to 10. That's as high as it gets. That's as bad as it gets. Very disabled, a lot of pain. After she'd gone through 37 treatments, taking the pressure off the disc, allowing to restore the function to the annulus, her ending pain was an 8, her ending Oswestry was an 8, ODI was an 8, less disability, ending pain was a 2. So what does that mean? Her Oswestry changed 44. This is disabled, this is living pretty good. Okay, her pain had gone from an 8 down to a 2, so she was feeling a lot better. This is the result. The result is outcome. This is patient-reported outcome. Oswestry is patient-reported outcome. So what happens is that outer portion of the annulus starts to push back to the inside and stabilize. Takes some time, but it does happen. We can see it on an MRI. We've done a lot of studies on MRIs, and you can physically see the changes. So that's the bulging disc. The bulging disc is where the annulus pushes to the outside of the between the vertebrae and starts to compromise the nerves a little bit in the area of the foramen, right in here. So the annulus pushes out. What do? We take pressure off. We take pressure off, and the annulus pushes back to the inside. This is a copy of all our case studies. We're up to almost 900 now. Okay? And of these 900, I'm going to get there. Bulging disc is 670. Okay? Bulging disc is 670, and degenerated disc is 622. And 588 of those had sciatica. So they tend to all be connected. They tend to be very similar. So we treat a lot of bulging disc, And the key to treating these chronic back problems, bulging, herniated, degenerated, is the unweighting of the disc and doing exercises. We unweight the disc and we do the exercise, and a combination of those two things is what makes you better. So, two things. Number one, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe, because you will get, every time we go live, you'll get an indication that we're going live, and you can watch more of our videos. We have a lot of tips on there, a lot of exercises. Our goal is to get you out of back pain. You don't have to live with back pain. We can help you. Subscribe to our channel. If you have friends or family members that are not getting better or have a back problem that's causing them a lot of trouble, refer them to our page. We can help them. That's it for today, Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, right? Tomorrow we'll be back with more information and tips, and we may even do a food tip tomorrow, but my goal is to help you better understand outcome. What you can do for your back so you don't have to live in back pain. That's it. I'm out. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Drive safe.